Okay, I might go ahead and get started. So hello, everybody. I'm Rupal Isman. I'm the director of the Sydney Knowledge Hub. We support research commercialization here at the University of Sydney. It's important for research students to be able to think about research commercialization as an opportunity and a career pathway they can pursue. So I'm really glad that that you're all joining us today. So whether you're a student or a, earlier mid-career researcher, you'll be hearing more and more of this from the university and from me personally. So I'm really glad that you can join us. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that I am on Gadigal land. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present here on Gadigal land, and to the land that you're tuning in from. I'd also like to extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples that we have here today. So today we have three great speakers. We have Associate Professor Ali Abbas, who is the director of the Waste Transformation Research Hub. Ali is an incredible asset to the university. He is working, not only in his work, which is around sustainability and the circular economy, which is getting more and more traction because of, how visible he has been and how much he's pulled people together. We were just talking about that before we started this call. He has such an external perspective as well on how research can impact outcomes in business. Together, we were also just reminiscing about a year ago, we started planning for the Australian Circular Economy Conference, which was about a year ago, which were 35 events. And I think something like 1,000 people showed up. And we were just hearing on ABC earlier, one of the projects that we're starting from that conversation that really is now kind of active from that conversation. Ali is also quite generous with his time, so spreading the good word of research commercialization through events like these and by supporting early stage businesses. We also have Mobin Nomvar and Thomas Telfer from Scimita Ventures. Ali is also the founder and the director of that organization. So Scimita is a consultancy that helps scientists and engineers bring their inventions to the market. They help researchers with what we call the valley of death, which is the long way from a proven technology to really a successful commercial application that takes a lot of time and money and effort. And that's where many innovations are really left for dead. So the more conversations we have like this, the more, Scimita and other people like that are supporting you, the more likely you'll be to cross that valley of death. They're going to take you through 10 pillars that researchers should work through when considering bringing their work to the market. We'll have a good chunk of time for Q&A at about 4:30 or so. So 30 minutes if we're on track. There's a bunch of people here, so we ask that you put questions in on the chat below, and one of us can address them after the presentation. We are a big crowd here, so we also ask that you stay muted, please. But first, I'd like to talk through some basics. So what is research commercialization? I've been saying that kind of phrase quite a bit, but I'm also quite conscious to make even wording really approachable so that we don't alienate people from the language that we use. Essentially, through your research, you may have an invention or a solution or kind of innovation that your research helps bring you to. This invention or solution might be unique. It potentially could be protected. That is actual property, and that's what we call intellectual property. That's just as could be just as valuable as physical assets like a house or a car. You can protect that potentially through a patent, and then you can bring it to market or essentially have people pay for it. You can do this through two ways. You can do this through a license that is an agreement with an existing company that pays to use your invention, or it could be through a new organization, or what we call, generally a startup. So we want you to be able to think about that whole process of commercialization and the end goal about potentially you being an entrepreneur as a legitimate career pathway. And while it might take you a while to actually generate revenue from your solution, you need to set your projects up really well at the beginning to start to realize this pathway in the best way possible. And so why is this all important? Why is research commercialization important? Firstly, I think it's for your career. Presumably everyone here is researchers or potentially you're supporting researchers, and you're really interested in your area of study. We all know that academic jobs are few and far between, particularly relative to the number of PhDs there are here. And in Australia's current economy, jobs in deep tech and R&D, while they're growing, they're still few and far between. If you're an academic, we find that researchers with commercialization experience tend to be better at attracting funding, which we know is getting stretched. You know, oftentimes grant applications are acting kind of like, what is the end result? What is the impact that your research is going to make? We still have a lot of researchers that are kind of copy and pasting, you know, the answer, but the more you're actually able to kind of envision the real world impact, the more you're going to attract funding. So most importantly, I think this is also, you know, more than anything, the way to get the best direct impact from your work. Your research has the opportunity to change lives. So getting it to the people who can use it is a great way to get the most impact possible. Now, I acknowledge that, you know, of course, all research is not relevant for commercialization. There is basic research. So I'm talking to a subsection of you. So at the Sydney Knowledge Hub, we help connect people like you, research entrepreneurs, to the right resources as you go through this journey. So we can do this by connecting you to other resources at the University of Sydney or beyond. We run a co-working space on campus where we have about 22 organizations. About half of those are researchers from the University of Sydney. The other half are external startups and organizations that are working with the university. So, you know, if that's interesting to you, you can let us know. We also make a ton of introductions. So if you're at the University of Sydney, we connect you to other supporters and programs and so forth within and externally. So we can even help you if you're external. And if you are an external participant right now, if you're not from the University of Sydney, and if you're interested in collaborating with the University of Sydney, we can help you with that. Some of the introductions we also make is through accelerator programs. And I just want to note that this event is also part of the Spark Festival, which kicks off today. And at 6 p.m., so in a couple hours, they're hosting a reverse pitch from the ecosystem. You'll hear from people like me again, but just for 90 seconds, Airtree, StartMate, the studio, so all different programs that you can participate in. We'll be posting links and information throughout this session in the chat. So if you'd like them to be sent to your inbox, please add your contact details to the form posted in the chat now. And Sasha, our community manager, will send you a link to access office hours and other resources that you might find interesting. Let's see, anything else to include? I think that's it. So Ali, over to you.
Thank you, Rupal. Can you hear me and can you see the screen?
We can hear and see you.
Excellent. I'm going to go into presentation mode now and we'll start. So thank you very much, Rupal, for this very kind introduction. And it is a great pleasure for me to be here with you all today. Before I start, I also would like to pay my respects to the First Nation peoples, past, present, and emerging. I want to thank all the organizers of this event and for inviting me here to speak with you today. In particular, I want to thank Rupal and also Mobin for organizing this event on behalf of Sydney Knowledge Hub and Scimita Ventures. These two wonderful organizations appropriately paying attention to research students and early career innovators and inventors. I disclose also that I am a founder and director of Scimita Ventures. So I'll spend the next few minutes sharing some thoughts and inspirations on how your journey of research commercialization could take place. Thinking through some commercialization ideas. So university research commercialization, or URC, as the government likes to call it now, is really a problem in Australia. It's a dog's breakfast. It still continues to be a challenge and limiting a lot of the productivity. There's some very good and successful stories of research commercialization from universities. However, that's not the norm. And there is certainly a major problem in Australia on that front. You as an early career innovator are at the center of it, and you also hold a central key to this problem. You can see this nice cartoon here I borrowed from the internet, and it shows you all the different things. And I focus on this word ecosystem. So we do talk about innovation ecosystem and developing that. And again, Sydney Knowledge Hub and Scimita Ventures and the university are working in that space to develop this ecosystem that can be very conducive for university research commercialization. This is an asymmetric challenge. We've got, us as researchers working in universities, and we've got industry people on the other side, if you like. We'd like to be together, and of course we want to talk to industry a lot more, work with them closer and closer. But it's a challenge because industry has different goals to university. They're looked at differently. So from the industry perspective, they're seeking profits. Universities are seeking grants. Industry have research directions set by management, whereas universities' research directions are set by us, the researchers. There is importance about confidentiality, secrecy, and patents in the industry. We are focused on publications. There is value building and transferring of technology in the industry. We work at the early stage of that transfer cycle. The important one here is the speed at which things are done. So when we talk about industry, they talk to us and tell us we want things done in 6 weeks, in 3 months. When we come back to the university projects, we talk about 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, and sometimes 5 and 10-year projects. So those types of timelines are critical to understand, and the difference between them, in my opinion, is one of the big problems that we have in alignment between industry and university. So we want to understand this landscape. We want to understand this innovation ecosystem. And of course, at the background, we are considering the changing world, all the different, the pandemic is an excellent example here, how it's changed the way we view things, including research. But government is putting, in Australia particularly, is putting a lot of emphasis on the research now in light of what they're calling impact pathways. Rupal mentioned some of that, those ideas. And the point here is to try to consider research that would create value and create impact in the industry all the time. So in this way, you could see some of these mappings of the research impact pathways by the government, considering things like new IP, new companies and spin-offs, and also benefits in terms of economic, health, and social, and so on. As researchers, we've been focused a lot on publications in the past, but we need to start considering a lot more these other outputs and outcomes and benefits, the impact pathways in society. So consider your publications and how you deal with them. And also we are told by Australia's leaders about this changing landscape in the university research commercialization and the need to produce not just brilliant research, but work more with businesses and government to translate breakthrough products and solutions for business. So given that, that's great news. There is a shift. We know there is. In the last, especially 2 years, I've seen some incredible strides happening in that direction to change. The universities are big ecosystems. They are clunky at times in terms of how things are done in terms of commercialization. But the good news is there's a lot of positive attention in this direction, and we're going to see a lot more change and shift towards commercialization from universities. So we need to, as early career researchers or researchers in general, to pay a lot more attention to that. What I've thought about to chat with you today is nothing technical, but just a few ideas, what you might call your recipe for innovation journey. And at the end of the slide, I'd recommend you to also think about your own specific individual recipe for your innovation journey. So key thoughts here are yourself, I say me, passion, hunger, and happiness is very important. So you need to nurture your passion and maintain your drive and hunger along the way. And happiness is so important here. Happiness and creativity, because research is really about being so creative. Happiness goes a long way towards being creative and developing creative research outputs. So that means, it might mean building your own self. Think about these achievements that you can make, even if they are incremental achievements. They can create that those happy moments that can drive that motivation, self-motivation, and develop your skill set and track record. That builds your confidence. My academic supervisor. That's very important. So here I don't want to discuss in detail what that relationship is about. That's a whole, it requires another day for this. But what I want to highlight here is an idea on how to be not a good leader in your case as a researcher or inventor, but how to be a good follower. There is good research now showing that leaders are only influencing about 20% of the success of companies in the commercial world. So there is about 80% left for followership, if you like, to influence success. And that's important to understand, because that's about being a team player. It's about you being not a leader, but being a leader in training, if you like. Not a follower, but a leader in training. And it's about being a team player. It's about believing in your leader. That is very important. Trusting your leader and trusting that they are going to accomplish things on time. And following not the leader, but following the vision of that leader. So these are important concepts, and there's good research, recent research in this space towards the success of ventures and commercialization and teams working together. That's quite an important concept, because often we hear about how to be a good leader. Seldom we hear about how to be a good follower. It also means you want to fit in with your research supervisor. It also means communication to do so, and alignment, continuous alignment. It's very important that you are building your journey in a happy way, but also in alignment with the vision and direction of that research group or the research supervisor. So, a good idea is to agree on the scope, a scope that you are excited about, and to choose problems, like Rupal said earlier, problems that disrupt, that make most impact. Third, we talk about my innovation circle. And here, a concept of innovator-centered thinking. So there is some ideas around this in the sense that we don't want to lose touch with the individual inventor or researcher. We want to empower that inventor or innovator. And empowering them means that they themselves should also think and understand all their innovation circle, or the people that are inside that circle around them. And this starts with your colleagues, close colleagues working together with you. But very importantly here, you would be looking to work with people who are similar in terms of thinking to you, like-minded, and people who can have and build with you the trust and the respect, and of course give credit to them always, and they will also give you, they will not ignore the credit to you. Think about the team here, that circle. Think about things like always doing or saying that we rather than I. That's quite significant in the way innovation teams work. It's about collaboration. So you can see so far I've talked about me, my academic supervisor, and my innovation circle. If essentially this means people, and people. I'll come back to that. So my research commercialization, number 4, it's important that these solutions, or the solutions I create, are business savvy solutions. They make business sense. So here, it's very important, if we are looking to commercialize our research, to start to acquaint ourselves with business terminology, business understanding, business acumen, talk the industry language, answer the first question: who owns the IP? Often we enter the research ecosystem, but we don't have that thinking. It's very important as early career researchers to have good understanding of IP ownership. Identify your customer early on. And it's an amazing point. It's so important, so significant to understand the identification of the customer. It is critical to any success for any business idea or innovation, because you want to work on the customer problem. Understand and manage confidentiality and conflict of interest. I argue this is absolutely critical. We suffer a lot from this lack of management of this, if you like, or lack of awareness of this, lack of understanding of how this can be done. There are ways now that are evolving rather quickly, and we're able to do things. So we're able to wear multiple hats. We can have a researcher at the university. We can have the same researcher also running a company, developing and establishing a startup or a spin-off. And we can manage that quite well. But there is still a bit of an exercise that we all need to work on to facilitate that much better. So that's an important one, because it allows us to get over those hurdles and get going with the actual innovation that we need to do. We also need to understand business. We understand the commercial pathways. We need to hook into them and make our solutions work for those business commercial pathways rather than the other way around. We need to serve those business purposes. And thirdly here, create serendipity. It is an amazing concept, I think, how to be able to cultivate a mindset of serendipity. So this is interesting. I encourage you to look into it and research it, because just simply that, a very simple example, in meetings, when you meet people, network, just mentioning things out of the left sometimes has, or can lead to projects, to ideas, to partnerships. So you need to think about how you do that, how to network, how to create that serendipity, and maybe use social media strategies to do that and align yourself with others in the broader community. Finally, I say, leave some room for faith. Lean on your own knowledge. Have faith in yourself, in other words, in your own research excellence, because of course innovation needs research excellence and foundational knowledge. So believe in yourself, have that faith, but now and then look up to the sky. So I finish here. I think the journey for commercialization is quite challenging. It can be done better, as I said, and we are seeing a shift towards that facilitation. I would say here, in terms of thinking commercially, it's about innovator-centric. It's about people. As I said, relations. Build those relations, nurture those relations. And really, it starts with the customer, investors, but also those relationships with other innovators like yourselves. So thank you, and thank to the organizers again. And I'm sure we're going to hear a good discussion by our Scimita colleagues next, who will discuss some aspects of the commercialization as well. So thank you all, and I'm happy to join you later for the Q&A.
Great, Ali, thank you. Mobin and Thomas, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Ali. Let me just share my screen in the presentation. Okay, can you all hear me and see me?
And yes, we can.
So I'm not on mute. That's great. Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. I guess once we started talking about this event, I was really excited because we could really share a number of really interesting angles that we found when people, our clients, and the industry as a general starts to think commercially about a piece of technology, a piece of idea, a paper or discovery. And we thought that's an excellent opportunity for us to condense all of our experience on what we learned in the past 5 years and just pass it on to you in less than 40 minutes. So this presentation is an attempt to achieve that. And we are more than happy to share as much as we know about the whole space and everything that we learned. So a very short introduction into Scimita Ventures. Scimita Ventures, Ali and I founded the company 5 years ago now. And we ended up filling a gap in the market that exists at the moment. And that is doing RD&D projects, research, development, and demonstration projects, but in a very different manner, in a very different style, using agile techniques and lean principles, with the purpose of really cutting down that time frame from years of development, sometimes to months of developments. And you've got many, many stories to tell about in this space. But at the bottom of it, what do we create is we create Australian market-ready deep tech solutions. So those are the kind of the keywords I really like. They're Australian. The idea is Australian. They're Australian made, if you like, so you can claim that logo. And they're market ready, meaning that the market is at the center of the solution from almost day one when we start a project. And the recipe really of our success is we managed to invent a new way of how to deal with this problem. So that has been a bit of a vacuum there. You've got research institutes who generate a lot of interesting IP. We've got established engineering companies who do engineering work, but there was not many institutions or companies who kind of fill the bridge, fill the gap between that research and that engineering entities, and eventually help and facilitate, get their hands dirty, and bring deep technology into the market. So this small graph really is the DNA of Scimita Ventures. So we think like scientists, and we are as practical as engineers, but we've got a very strong entrepreneurial spirit that marries it all together. So we sit at that overlapping area. We're not engineers, we're not scientists, we're not entrepreneurs. We're a combination of all of them. And I think since we started, I'm really happy that we have been growing quite rapidly, organically. So we've got now 420 square meters of lab and office space, workshop. We can prototype a lot of different things. We can run experiments and a lot of exciting things. And till today, we have delivered 19 deep tech projects, and we maintain 100% success rate all the way through. So I'll stop there. So that's all I want to talk about Scimita Ventures, because I needed to give you a bit of a context about what all the information that you're going to hear and see, where is it coming from? And that was the only purpose of that. So today, we are going to talk about 10 really important activities that we believe every researcher who thinks commercially about the research needs to do early on in the journey. Today's presentation is going to be delivered by myself and Thomas, who is one of our core team members. My background is chemical engineering. I've got a history in engineering space and physics. Thomas has got a background in biology, chemistry, and pharmacology. So that's where he's coming from. And in our company, we've got a very interesting mix of people. We've got agile practitioners, we've got mechanical engineers, we've got experienced entrepreneurs. It's a very interesting mix of people that we've got on the company. Okay, without further ado, these are the 10 key pillars, key activities that needs to get done relatively early on. So we divided them to 4 different categories to make it easier, because 10 is too much of a big number when we talk about concepts and ideas. So we divided to technology related matters, things like technology landscape analysis, technology and product ideation, and proof of concept. Business related matters, pre-feasibility economic analysis, business case and venture design, and market opportunity. compliance, that's not really the right word, but we struggle to find the right word to attach to this category of activities. But they talk about really regularity requirements as one pillar, intellectual property opportunity, which is a fascinating subject, and sustainability, circularity. And lastly, grant opportunities, which talks to funding. So 5 of them, I'm going to present that. 5 of them, Thomas is going to present that. And we're going to start with Thomas, and we're going to start from technology landscape analysis. And over to you, Thomas.
Perfect. And Mobin's going to control the slides for me. So I guess we're going to see how in sync we are. Truly interesting. So to get straight into it, essentially any product that you're developing is a solution to a problem that is experienced by people. A technology is a potential solution, whereas a product is an application of that solution in a package that's ready for use. So even if you think that you might have a really good solution in mind, it's really important to start off investigating what other technology exists in your field that you're working in. It's unfortunately the sad reality that most products and therefore companies fail not through lack of effort, but because they fall in love with their ideas and just operate with blinkers on, ignoring everything else that's happening around them. There's an example next. An example you might be familiar with that unfortunately I found out was a bit of a myth when I was investigating this. It was NASA developing pens so that they could write in space. I think the reason why this example has resonated with so many people over the years is because what you've got is a problem needing to write in space. You have a seemingly simple solution. So that solution is using a pencil. And yet it seems like NASA had overcomplicated this, over-engineered the solution, and spent a lot of money in doing so. What they had actually done is a complete technology landscape analysis and identified a number of flaws with the pencil idea, and ultimately led them to developing a pen that they could use in zero gravity environments. So as much as possible, you want to try and perform a review of all potential solutions to your problem that you're trying to solve without any bias, which can be really difficult. Your core focus should be on ranking them based on a set of criteria that you've identified, with their technology readiness level being key to shortening the pathway to market. So performing a technology landscape analysis, Mobin is a bit preemptive, will help you identify the best possible technology to continue development on. And it will make, even if you're sure that your solution is the right one, it'll give you an understanding of everything else that's going on in your space so that you can position your technology to succeed. And you may even be able to take inspiration from some of these technologies to improve your own. Now we've got another example, which is perhaps one of the most well-known examples of a product flopping. So this juicero machine was a really expensive machine where essentially what you'd do is buy a package of diced fruit from the supermarket, put it in this $700 machine. The machine would squeeze the fruit and out would come some juice. Somewhat unsurprisingly, the product completely flopped despite a lot of initial investment. And the reason for this is because the company seemingly didn't do a really good technology landscape analysis. An alternative, for example, instead of going to the shops to buy this bag of juice that you could take home and juice in this really expensive machine, you could just buy the juice itself, right? So we regularly perform this activity for a lot of our clients such that we can take an unbiased approach for them and identify technologies which balance both their time to market and also other considerations that may be applicable. There's also, we know, only so much that you can learn from reading and research. So we think it's really important to also get out there and talk to people, maybe other players in the field, relevant organizations, people that are working on the technology that you've identified, and even your competitors, if that makes sense to you. You also don't want to limit your search to just technologies that have already been applied to solve your problem, but you might also be able to identify transferable technologies, those that are applied in slightly different problems that you might be able to bring across to your own problem. So next up, we've got a technology and product ideation phase. So this is kind of the next logical step on from your technology landscape analysis. Essentially what you're doing here, the reason you would be doing this is if you identify no clear technologies in the previous step that are ready for commercialization. So essentially you're taking a technology with a low technology readiness level and mapping out the pathway to take it from its current state through to a product. This may not be just simply taking one technology and putting it right through to commercialization. You might be taking a number of technologies or even some really fundamental scientific ideas and banging them together and coming up with a new solution. You want to focus here on accounting for what you already know and drawing up a blueprint for how you will achieve that status, taking into account factors like your likelihood of success, the resources that you might require, and the pathway towards execution. So you want to map out your blueprint to be pretty low risk if possible. As your idea might be pretty early in development, it may still involve some validating it, for example, in a lab before you progress it through scale up and into a product. And through doing this, you can make a pretty early determination whether your product is viable or not, so that you're not wasting any development effort. It also provides you an opportunity to develop essentially an MVP that you can use to assist yourself in revenue raising. And also it might be a way that you can start to validate your product with customers out in the real world. And I think even just having this pathway to productization mapped out is really useful because it essentially is the content that you need when you're applying for grants that we'll touch on a little bit later. So there are a number of examples of this. I guess as a pharmacologist by training, one that has always been thrown a lot is the story of the development of Viagra. So this actually started as a treatment for heart disease. But in really early clinical trials, they found out that there was, unfortunately or fortunately, I guess, a really unusual side effect. And the company then took this idea, spun it off into something completely new, and developed one of the world's biggest drugs that's earning billions of dollars every year. Another example here is Post-it notes. So the adhesive used for Post-it notes was actually initially intended to be able to put planes together, but they found that it was actually a pretty lousy adhesive. Although you could stick things on with a bit of pressure, it didn't hold very well. And at the same time, there was another engineer working at the same company, and he was a choir singer, and he would keep, his bookmark would keep falling out of his book that he was singing from. And he sort of put two and two together and was like, we've got this adhesive, I've got this problem, bang them together, and Post-it notes were born. So a few key considerations to take into account when you're ideating towards a product are, as I mentioned before, taking inspiration from multiple sources if possible, validating your solution as early as possible, both from a technical perspective and also a customer perspective. I think something that's really key is not falling in love with your idea, always being open and receptive to feedback. And also, if things aren't working, not being afraid to stop, pause, and pivot what you're doing.
Okay. So I guess now I talk about proof of concept angle activity that Thomas just briefly touched on that one. So proof of concept, by the sound of it, is pretty simple and straightforward. But there are a couple of trends that you are seeing that happening when people do proof of concepts. So one important point that is being missed quite frequently in doing proof of concept is the core business promise is not included in conduction of the proof of concept. So how I define a good proof of concept is a proof of concept that, depending on your core business promise, can validate your idea, whether in silico, on computer, or in real life. So any activity that can achieve that, you can call it a proof of concept. Now, obviously, depending on the technology, that can take many different forms and shapes, and often it involves a feedback loop from a potential customer. Now, why this is important? Generating ideas are relatively easy, but I would say one needs to build their own confidence in their own tech and also generate enough evidence for others to also believe in the technology and their business promise. So as part of that, you want to generate critical design data during the proof of concept phase. Now that is really important. That's often being missed out. When you're doing a proof of concept, one thing is, you want to show your technology works in the context of the business promise that you're going to deploy the technology. And the other part is you want to identify the key design requirements that you need to meet in the future. But all of those things requires some data to be generated. And a proof of concept phase in an ideal phase to generate those data. Another reason that you want to do this activity is to gain a validated understanding of the resources you require. And that's time, money, and skills. So whenever to whoever I talk to, when I talk about resources, I always name those three: time, money, resource, skills. Your technology venture can fail for another competitor launch a product sooner than you run out of money, you don't have the right skills in your team. A good proof of concept is going to inform you on all of those three key resources that you require. Well, of course, another point is to avoid reputational damage. I think that's hugely cultural. I've heard the stories that, in different places in the world, the take on an entrepreneur failure is different. But in many cases, you don't want to be the person, the guy, the driver behind a failed technology. That's important for that reason to do a proper proof of concept. Now, a couple of considerations or important points that you want to have when you do proof of concept. Definitely follow a scientific methodology. Now, what does that mean is, of course, it means, you've got a hypothesis. You're designing a set of experiments to achieve a certain thing. So following that logic, that methodology is really important. The another important point is keep the proof of concept relevant to the core business promise. So if I want to, for example, develop a medical device to track blood glucose, as an example, if I grab a beaker of blood and I can track, blood glucose in that beaker, that's nice, but it's far beyond a proof of concept. A proof of concept requires doing it in the context of the pain point that you want to solve. So if doing that work requires a machine as big as this table, then you have all other different problems down the track. But if your business promise is to solve that in the context that everybody can use it, the general market can use it, then you need to have that consideration inside the business promise. So avoiding over-engineering is an important point. Remaining agile, documentation, and including relevant benchmarks. A lot of people are going to ask you, that's nice, that's what you've done. Well, what does it mean? And in that way, you need to have a benchmark to compare what you've done with others. So I jump to next one. The business pre-feasibility economic analysis is a really, really important point activity. So what is this? Is a combined technical and economic analysis of a technology, which often involves modeling, whether financial and technical combined. It often includes cash flow projections relevant to a business model, i.e. how you make money, which I'm going to touch base on that one. And it also involves scenario development and sensitivity analysis, fair bit of those things. So you develop a model that represents your technology solution, then you develop a technical economic model, then you couple the two to make really interesting and important insights about your specific technology. Why it is important to identify the key cost barriers. You may find there are certain sections of your technology, when you talk about it from the product point of view, that are going to be cost prohibitive and going to be really, really expensive. It's going to inform your business case and venture design, which are going to touch base. It's going to inform your go-to-market strategy and key partners. In some places, if you partner up with another company, you can gain substantial economic benefits, which if you include in your pre-feasibility, it can have a substantial impact on how much it costs for you to do business. And it gives you an indication of profitability. So considerations or key considerations are sourcing costing data, where you're going to get your costing data. Definitely get in touch with contract manufacturers, component suppliers, people who have got experience with product development and product design. Another really important aspect is include indirect costs. Indirect costs quite often are much bigger than direct costs. And consider the effects of scale on costing. If you're producing a technology, 10,000 of them a year, the costing of it is very, very different from 100 of those devices a year. It's going to blow out potentially your cost benefit analysis, which is going to inform how you're going to design a product or what sort of pain point you're going to address with a certain technology, or how you want to package that product. So a very good example of that we've done recently is a battery recycling technology that you've developed for a client. So in this example, we include a benchmark, and really through this pre-feasibility economic analysis, we identified why the benchmark is so expensive, which is the reddish color on the screen. And by identifying that, then we came up with a design that did not include that really expensive component, or what would cause it to be expensive. And that way, we ideated a plan that was 3 times less expensive. So that's kind of how doing a pre-feasibility analysis early on can impact how you design or how package your solution, and or even where you're going to have your innovation focused on, or innovation effort focused on. Really, really important point. And in that way, our client had an idea about unlocking a certain market, which was not possible with the current technologies available. And this way, we could enable that unlocking to take place. I'm also going to talk about business case and venture design, which is another, probably a bit more alien concept when we come to deep tech. So essentially, in very simple words, what it is how you make money out of your technology or product. Very, very simple. How and why people should pay you, how much you are going to pay you, by when they're going to pay you, in what way they're going to pay you. So it is really important, because it is why people are going to invest in you. Even if you are doing it for, you're solving a really important problem and your main driver is not making money, money is required to propel your mission or your vision. So you have to generate money somehow along the way. And that consideration is really important in the life of the project and early on in how you design the product. Now, the other point, really important point, is going to identify you what to protect in your deep technology venture. People talk a lot about patents. We are going to touch base on that shortly. There are a lot of conversation about patents, but that's not the best way to always protect your business. But where and how you're going to make money is going to inform you where you're going to spend your protection budget. Is it going to be on patent attorneys, or is it going to be on securing long-term contracts or whatever? Another point is going to really inform you the key stakeholders or the key partners that you want to secure all the way along the way. till you are that profitable, nice revenue generating business. Considerations, we've got 5 key considerations here. Business case has to be tightly linked to the product definition. It's probably the most artistic aspect of all entrepreneurship journey. So you need to be really creative and validate the pain points that you're going to address with your product. Everybody loves big numbers, but here, I guess you need to be realistic and talk to experienced entrepreneurs. There are a lot of stuff that people are doing and really, really creative and smart that you don't get to know about them. And the only way to know about it is just to talk to someone who made money before. I guess in here I presented, put together some, some business models or how you can make money that are gaining traction these days. Before this session, we were just talking about subscription model. It was a time that subscription model as a business model was a software thing, but now it is gaining a lot more traction. It essentially is about charging customers on a regular basis, locking them in exchange of a service. And that service might be provision of a software. As put examples here, it might be provision of coffee bean or water even. Licensing model is another one, which makes sense to a lot of technology idea products. Like drugs, catalysts, even IP. Your venture can be around making IP, and you can license IP as a source of revenue. That's all perfectly fine. You don't have to go all the way through to the end of the journey. And advertisement model, and I guess razor blade models as other types of business models. If you don't mind, I'll just jump through the market opportunity and we go through, go through another one. I may come back to this and jump to the regulatory requirements that I pass on to Thomas in the interest of time.
Perfect. So I think this is another activity that's really important to do right at the outset of developing your venture. And that is, if you could click, Mobin, that is understanding the regulatory requirements that apply to you. This would be really specific given the field that you're working in. There are some that are generic, but there are also a lot that are really specific. And on top of that, there are also jurisdiction-specific regulations. So being aware of these early on is important so that you can know what potential hurdles you might be encountering during development. This will let you develop a plan such that you can manage your technology and subsequently product development while adhering to these requirements as you go. If you're not aware early on, there's a risk that you might be developing something that's not compliant, ultimately causing a huge amount of wasted effort, time, money, etc. I guess talking specifically to the medical device industry, which is an area that I have come from, if you're not aware of the requirements as you're going from a compliance standpoint, there's a large risk that you might get to what you think is your product, but then actually have to go back and repeat a lot of your work just so that you can have the documentation that you require. I guess an example of regulations gone wrong is one that everyone might have heard of, I think it was last year. It was this instrument called biocharger that was spruiked by everyone's favorite, I guess, celebrity chef, Pete Evans, who also is a 2-time winner of the Bent Spoon Award. So if you haven't heard about it, I suggest having a Google to find out about it. Essentially, it's this really expensive light that is claimed to have all these miraculous abilities, one of which at the time last year was claimed to be able to cure COVID. The TGA caught on to this pretty quickly, and within a few days of being on sale on his website for the alarming cost of $15,000, he was slapped with 6 different breaches or infringements, and also fined $80,000 for attempting to sell this whilst not paying attention to the regulations that apply for medical device sales in Australia. So I'd say it's totally fine if you're not an expert in these regulations yourself, but it's important to seek out experts who you can talk to and give you case-specific advice while you're going. At Scimita, we regularly work with experts across different industries that we're involved in. such that we can guarantee that we're always up to standard. For example, in the medical device space that we've been working in. It's especially important in innovation projects where you may be doing something for the first time, or you might fall into a bit of a gray area. And one last point is that you'll want to also make sure that you have procedures in place to make sure that you're maintaining compliance as you go. Next up, I think we've got intellectual property, which is something that I find really fascinating. And honestly, I think is a topic that everyone should have a baseline understanding in. So typically literacy is quite poor. And just before I start on this one, just a disclaimer that neither Mobin or I are patent attorneys. So everything we're saying is just for general information only. So when working on an idea or starting a new venture, it's important to have an IP strategy really early on that aligns with your business strategy. You want to be able to develop your IP and protect it and build value in your company at the same time. The IP that you hold is an early indicator of the value of your venture. You'll hear numbers being thrown around for startups, for example, that up to 90% of your value can be just in the IP that you hold. The market typically sees value in patents, which have been talked about a bit already today, but I just want to point out that there are also other forms of IP that can be equally as valuable, and you'll typically want quite a diverse portfolio of IP that is specific to your business needs to offer you maximum protection. I think I've got an example of this on the next slide, which is Coca-Cola. They're a really famous example of a trade secret. So Coke have never disclosed what their recipe is. And through doing so, even if someone was to copy exactly what they're selling, they've got no proof that they're copying it, and it's seen as being an inferior product. Whereas if they were to disclose it in the form of a patent, the patent would expire, or in jurisdictions where the patent isn't necessarily regulated, people could just copy the product and sell it at will. So I think through having a roadmap, you can constantly keep IP front of mind. Another example of this not being done is the development of the power board by an Australian company, Canbrook. They were really anxious to get this product to market. It was a fantastic invention, and they took it to market without going through the steps of patenting this product. So really quickly, everyone had caught on that it was fantastic. Everyone was selling power boards, and millions of dollars or hundreds of $millions of lost revenue were applied to Canbrook. So I think as part of developing this strategy, you want to understand the IP landscape in your field such that you know where you're free to operate. And you might be able to also take a few shortcuts by leveraging existing IP that exists in that space. It's important to also have a strategy that is right for your business. It's really business specific. Patents may be attractive, but they're not necessarily the best way to protect what you have. You want to work with an IP strategist if possible, not necessarily a patent attorney, but someone that you can call upon who has both commercial understanding and knowledge of IP law. And I guess the last point is, although Mobin and I aren't IP experts ourselves, we work quite closely with IP experts such that we can perform work in this space quite comfortably.
Okay, the next point is sustainability and circularity. So this is probably an activity that is relevant to ventures who've got a strong environmental aspect to their business, to their value proposition. But essentially it's a desktop study that benchmarks your environmental footprint in comparison to some other technology. It's often high level, it's often a bigger picture discussion or activity, and may also involve life cycle analysis, which is looking at end-to-end from a product or industry to determine how sustainable or how good your product is in terms of its sustainability offering. Why you want to do this? Sometimes sustainability becomes a very strong marketing message. In a biosecurity project that we've done recently, that became almost a differentiator factor for that product in comparison to other products that are in the market. So it can be a really important one, and people are going to generally customers are going to be more aware of these green aspects. But also sometimes it is critical in terms of informing your regulatory requirements and potentially unlocking new support channels and new support revenue streams. So sometimes this becomes additional cash that you can tap into as a source of revenue, not as a grant. But they are complex in nature, and it requires involving experts, and especially third-party validation is become really, really important in this space. And it might have outcomes that are relevant for the design phase. So if you want to boost your sustainability aspect, it should really be considered early on when you are talking about technology itself or turning a technology to a product. And last point, grant opportunity that again, I pass on to Thomas.
I can whirlwind through this one. So grants are obviously quite an attractive opportunity because they're really just maximizing how far every dollar you spend in your venture goes. Some might be just a simple award of capital, some might be co-funding schemes or different rebates. But I guess the point is that there are heaps of different grant opportunities available in Australia. It doesn't matter what size your business is, what industry you're working in, there will definitely be grants available. Some of them might be federal grants, some might be state specific. Although I guess to be aware of that there are also international ones, though this is a completely different ballgame when you're looking into grants. It's pretty easy to do a quick Google search and just hit on all of the grants that are available, some of which that might come up, the Accelerating Commercialization Grant, CSIRO offer a couple of grants, and also the Research and Development Tax Incentive is a big one for organizations that are performing R&D activities. I think I might just skip through this example. They're a really, really attractive opportunity because they're a form of raising revenue that limit your exposure to private funders such that you're preserving the maximum stake in your venture early on. Being awarded a grant also provides you a sense of legitimacy in your venture. The perception there is that your work has been reviewed externally and someone else has given it the tick of approval. So it gives you this really nice marketing piece. And there's also a really great opportunity through doing these to network. Something that we do at Scimita is we put together a scientific advisory board with our grants. So this gives us an extra edge that might improve our competitiveness with applying for a grant. It benefits the people that we're working with in that they're getting access to some grant money. And also it provides us an ongoing resource, an ongoing source of expertise in a specific discipline that we didn't necessarily have. Some really quick things to consider are your eligibility for the grants, of course, is number one. As well as that, you want to be applying for grants that are right for the size of your venture. This is also talking to the value of the grants. Of course, you want to be achieving a certain value, but you don't want to be attracting too much value. That can also be a problem. When you're putting together your roadmap of what you're going to apply for, timing and how involved the application processes is very important. And also understanding the grant structure and assessment time, because there can often be quite a lag between grants being awarded or grants being applied for, grants being awarded, and then you actually getting the money, which has implications on your business.
Yeah, so that was the 10 important early activities that we identified from our experience. And now I pass it on to Rupal for Q&A.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Mobin and Thomas. That was wonderful. If you could maybe stop sharing, then we can see each other. I think those 4 areas that you outlined, the technology, the business side of it, compliance, which is like essentially the full ecosystem around your business is, and funding, of course, are 4 like great areas to think about. And you know, one point that I made, in I guess by LinkedIn when I was promoting this event, is that the Sydney and Australian ecosystem for support along all of these 4 areas is really, really increasing. So don't feel like you're alone in kind of tackling even very early stages of your idea to commercialization. There are people that really want to help you, whether that just be within the university that you're in, or in the University of Sydney, or otherwise, or externally. There's lots of government money, people that would love to support, particularly around research commercialization, because for a couple of reasons. One, because you probably have more IP that's predictable than kind of a normal business or a non-research based business. But then two, also, presumably there's kind of a world positive aspect of your business, and there's a lot of funding out there for world positive innovations. So does anyone have any questions for anyone, for Ali, who's a researcher within the university, or Mobin or Thomas, or me in the Sydney Knowledge Hub? I have a question, Mobin and Thomas. How do people work with Scimita? Like, what sort of model do you have when you are engaging research entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so there are a number of ways. So our typical way is delivering services for a fee. Sometimes we also get invited to be partners in the projects in a longer term basis. But essentially those two ways are the key ways. With Sydney University, we have got a discussion going on. Actually, our first project with Sydney University got approved for funding last week, which is a very exciting one. But we've got conversation going on at the senior management level at the chancellor and at that level with Sydney University, to how we get aligned such that we can better support researchers in the University of Sydney. I think that's a really important one. We are already having many conversations with academics, entrepreneurial academics in the University of Sydney. But we'd like to just expand on that and build more success stories and with more evidence that this marriage is going to be hugely beneficial for the academics, the university to increase revenue from IP with the massive asset that it generates every almost day, and from job creation point of view, instead of because that's really going to be a job creation, economy boosting. So entrepreneurship is really the fuel behind growth of the economy if you don't have natural resources, or you don't rely on natural resources. So I think that those are the really important engagement criteria. But they're always welcome. Anyone is welcome to come and join and have a visit to our offices in St. Peter's. And of course, there are a lot more that we can showcase or show, or even office hours we've got now for this Friday, I believe, is being set up. That can be a very good early engagement. So we help as much as we can, and it's all about boosting the ecosystem, as Ali and yourself mentioned.
Great. And Sasha just popped in office hours with Scimita over there. So we mentioned that in the beginning, but if you just want to have a chat with them, feel free. We have a couple of other questions. So there's been an article in the press today about scientists leaving their field due to lack of career progressions. Have you any comments on that? I saw that as well, a survey that came out, and it's pretty not the greatest news for our research organizations, and the prospects of how much of a leader we can be on a global stage from our research actually kind of being commercialized, and the basic research all the way to kind of having research organizations be the engine behind kind of the sophistication in our economy. I don't know if anyone has a comment. I can kind of maybe open this up to if there's any maybe to one or two comments on this. I think in general, this panel would probably agree that commercializing your work kind of helps diversify your career prospects, and so thinking about and also what Ali mentioned earlier, kind of happiness is the fuel to creativity. When you're challenged in kind of things outside of your immediate kind of purview, it helps bring a little bit of energy into perhaps the part of your work that you might be a little bit less engaged on. But
I guess Rupal, you know, what I can share is, you know, I resigned from a university position, a postdoc research position a few years back, and also Thomas resigned as well. So like so the living examples are here. So you know, we had a pretty good, you know, career in the university, but I think the primary reason that why I jumped out was I couldn't see the impact of my work. There were too many hurdles, and I thought if I get out, I have a much bigger opportunity to really contribute to the society and bring those innovations to life a lot faster. And what Ali mentioned at the beginning, the focus on publications or you know, getting grants. And the isolating nature that I was experiencing when I was an academic, you know, or doing academic job at the university. You know, when you come out, I think you just experience how big and massive the world is. So when you're kind of a researcher, you think, you know stuff, but when you step out, it's like I don't know anything. Like there is no way that you can learn enough or accumulate enough knowledge. So and you realize the importance of collaboration. Like we've got a venture in hydrogen that we've got almost 10 people like working there to just make it happen. With another proof of concept work that we've done on another venture, we had 8 people from very different expertise just doing work together day and night for 3 months, non-stop. So it's very different, I guess, experience. That's what I can say.
Yeah, great. Yeah, it's also important that we have great people within research organizations. So I don't want to encourage everyone to universities.
Also, that is not a life for everyone. Like, so, you know, there are people who thrive in the academic environment, and there are people who need a bit of a different, you know, or more diversity, or, you know, whatever you want to call it, more stress, if you like.
And Taylor at UCID's commercialization office made a good point about he completed his PhD a couple of years ago and didn't see great prospects for his own research career, but loved the commercialization part. And, you know, and so he's kind of making change within a research organization, supporting research commercialization. And, you know, this is my first university position. I came from kind of the startup ecosystem. And so I love doing what I'm doing. I think there's a lot of opportunity in this space as well. Biljana asked a question for Scimita. Do you work with the other side of the equation, businesses that need solutions?
Yes. So in fact, the majority of clients that we have are entrepreneurs who come to us who wants to enter to a new market. And we've got projects, we've done projects with the government that we've got active. We've got projects with ASX listed companies. So we've got quite a mix. In fact, you know, we are now trying to enter, like, our attempt to activate the research and academic side is relatively new, although Ali was insisting on that for several years. And he finally managed to convince me that we have to go that way too. So I think that's a relatively new one. When I say new, like in the past 6 months that we have tried to activate and do something in this space. And that was really after, I think, COVID, that, you know, that when COVID happened, the government realized that they need more and they need to tap into job creation a lot more, and commercialization of research became a relatively big, you know, really, really important aspect of recovering from COVID, which is not the term that I would agree. I think that has to be always the case. But that, I think that was a pivot point of understanding for many. So yeah, I guess in the past 6 months, we have been working on that front, and to also activate and help and support entrepreneurial academics. But the majority of clients at the moment are also from the private sector.
Mm-hmm. I mentioned this earlier, but something that I want to stress is that a lot of researchers feel really isolated on their journey of commercialization, and that is often because they don't have they're not aware essentially of the services and the people around them, but there are a lot of services and people and support around them. So Sasha, can you pop up that kind of the form, the link to the form? On there, we have the Sydney Knowledge Hub newsletter, which is, we kind of curate a lot of events and opportunities and grant opportunities and challenges and hackathons and cool people doing cool stuff. So you can sign up for that. There's also a link to a couple programs. So on campus here at the university, we have the Incubate program, which helps researchers and students with ideas to think about kind of the next steps they need from that business side that Scimita was talking about, and other links to different accelerator programs and so forth. So I'd encourage you to sign up there. Do we have any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for organizing it. I found it so helpful. I'm one of those isolated early career researchers. And I had a question because there was such great discussion about the need for proof of concepts. I'm in the stage before a proof of concept, and I need to acquire funding to do the proof of concept. And I found this space to be very isolating and very difficult. So I was wondering if you could provide advice on how to stay motivated, where to seek support, that type of thing. Thanks.
Yeah. Mobin, do you want to take that?
Sure. I guess for me is that the feeling and the thought of my idea is going to be experienced by others is really, really motivating. It might sound a bit funny, but almost the journey of creation is so unique. It's so empowering that I absolutely love, and that's why I got into business. Because I want to create a lot more, and I think once you create that, once you've got that idea that's being and now has got a physical representation, is probably the biggest boost of adrenaline that I would get from that. But the next step is someone actually paying for it. That's even, something, the next step. So, but I think what I would tell you is that period of isolation won't last long. And once you pass that, you will be so busy and there will be so many people around you that you will say, just leave me alone. I just want to be by myself. So yeah, that's a temporary step. But sometimes, sometimes you struggle to find time to just focus on something that you want to do. But that vision and that feeling that, just gets generated inside me is really what drives me. And I think a lot of other people in the team as well. And Thomas can speak on her behalf.
I think, other things in terms of isolation is get involved in communities. So, it's not self-promotion because we promote a lot of other organizations, but, kind of going to Sydney Knowledge Hub events and, really kind of participating in those sort of things. I know it's active and time consuming, but it's also, I think, where you'll find a lot of energy to continue. In terms of the funding part, I think there's a couple of different things. So the University of Sydney has the commercialization office has a seed fund. It's called the seed fund, which is what the commercialization used to be called. They just awarded theirs not too long ago, but that's, they award funding to continue research and to develop a proof of concept. There are a lot of startup accelerator programs that fund that do give seed funds. So for instance, that Incubate, our on-campus accelerator, as I mentioned, they give $5,000, and Sydney Knowledge Hub sometimes sponsors folks to go through that. So I'd encourage you to, applications for that are open right now. StartMate, for instance, is another one. They give a pretty good chunk of change, $75,000 for, really early stage concept. My husband just graduated from that program. He did his demo day last week, and he literally registered his website, and had concept level when he entered. He's a multiple time entrepreneur, so he had a little street cred, but he was very, very early on is what I'm saying. The Genesis program on campus I'm just speaking from a UCID perspective, so apologies if there's people outside of UCID, but the Genesis program out of the business school is a challenge that the winner gets $25K. Yeah,
and I think MVP grant is also an important one, depending on, I don't know what your technology is about, but for that project that we've got funding from University of Sydney is exactly the CD funding that Rupal just mentioned, and I helped. I actually wrote the application for that academic that who got granted. But I think we can support that kind of help at earlier stage. We know that you require a lot of help to be able to do that. But I think the important point is when you apply for some of these grants, it's important to have a good grasp of the commercial potential that your technology is holding, whatever that is. So getting good understanding of that is really important.
I think I have a couple of things if I can jump in.
Yeah.
One is even just talking to people that you know and making it known what you're doing is really beneficial. I mean, that's how I got a job with Mobin, is through talking to someone I know. And the other thing is, I think even though you might not be working on developing your technology, because that might cost money, you can always be working on things like getting your name out there, talking to people, marketing, all of that doesn't cost anything. And it really sets you up to getting money.
Yeah.
Correct.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the advice.
Anyone else have any questions?
I just wanted to comment, unless there's a question. I think there's one coming. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you to the response, because I put my question in. I'm Biliana Smith. I put the question in a written form. So thank you. This is about the business side of things, initiating the whole process. If you're open to that, I might give you a call, get in touch on two accounts. One is the business side of things, and some real businesses that are in the process of looking for help. And the other one is I've been working in Proto-X with a few people that might need some help, and there might be some synergies as well. So I'll get in touch, and then we see what we can do. But thank you. This is very impressive and very generous articulation of otherwise a very complex framework. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks for your comments, Biliana.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we might leave it at that. So thank you, everybody. Mobin and Thomas, thank you so much for that presentation. Everybody, we're going to email you that deck afterwards. I thought, like, just even thinking about the different buckets you have to think about is helps you kind of develop an approach to kind of like, what are my next steps? What are things I have to think about? So I'd encourage you to kind of look back at that slide just to think about what you do need to think about, even if you're very early on. Ali, thank you. As always, thank you for joining. If you guys come into Ali's orbit at all in your research, I'm sure he'd love to give you some advice and give you some support and encouragement. And if Ali isn't in your orbit, I'm sure there's someone within your school or your faculty that can take the place of Ali Abbas. So I'd encourage you to kind of, network and kind of find your way to them, to someone who is supportive of you. Sasha, thank you for organizing this. This is Sasha just started as our community manager a couple of weeks ago, and she has so she'll probably be seeing more of her if you kind of come into this research commercialization space with the Sydney Knowledge Hub. Thank you everyone for joining us. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.